Yep. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the April 23rd meeting of the Finance Committee. I call this meeting to order. The next, Mr. Sides is here, Mr. Morial, and Mr. Price, along with Ms. McLam, Dr. Houlihan, Mr. Strickland, Mr. Parker, and Mrs. Merrill. I need an approval of the agenda, but I would like to add a closed session for advice of counsel, and we'll do that after our open session. So do I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Motion to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next is approval of the minutes from the February 25th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Did everyone have a chance to look at them?
Yes, motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next item on the budget is an update on our current year budget. I asked Mrs. McLam to discuss this a little bit just because I know that with school shutting down and going online and remote, or whatever words you want to use, I know how we're tracking for expenses, because I know we've had to have more expenses because of what's going on, because we made packets for K through 5. So if you could just talk about that a little bit, since we only have a couple months left in this fiscal year.
Yeah, we're working on doing some projections of any realized savings from operational, not having all the heat and air and, trying to conserve on some of those operating expenses in the buildings. A lot of that is on a lag, so we're working to try to see what we've got to offset. There have been additional expenditures related to providing packets, at this point, we are still paying everyone. So there is no savings from any salary expenditures. So, it's almost as though we're operating in this remote environment with just really realized operational savings from the buildings. So I don't foresee there being any, substantial savings in the local budget from the closure.
Or we will be enough money to get through the closure.
We're working on some of the leave that was available has allowed individuals who may have been out on maybe out on FMLA due to some type of medical reason, they have been able to come back. So we're working through some of the additional positions that we've got to move around and make sure we can reconcile all those.
Okay, great. If you could just keep us up to date on that, that would be great. I appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions?
Shauna, how about payroll for some of the non-licensed professionals like bus drivers, food service? Is there going to be a significant savings there?
No, they are all eligible for the emergency leave. So we are continuing to pay everyone as though they're working. Some individuals are working and some individuals do not have the ability to work. And so those two criteria have made them eligible for that leave.
Excellent. Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda takes into account a little bit what we're talking about on this year's budget. The state appropriated $1.4 million for us for COVID-19, COVID-19, and it has to be used by June 30th. Can you give us an update on that?
Yeah, the majority of what those funds were allocated by the state, they were intended to fund lost receipts for child nutrition and after school. We're running a few sites, but they're still paying people. As I just said, they're eligible for that leave, so we're still paying them, but they're not generating any revenue to offset those costs.
Because
they're considered an enterprise account. So
they're not an enterprise fund. So they're usually getting the money in to pay for the workers and all that kind of stuff. The federal government's paying for the food, correct?
Well, there are some reimbursement. We're still eligible for reimbursements for the meals that they are serving. But there will be some additional replacement of the food that they've, they'll do some food ordering, and there'll be some things that'll have to take place as we move forward if we were to open schools back up. But for the most part, those funds are going to be exhausted plus some, just to fund the salaries for basically a 2-month period, is what we looked at, which would have been from the March 15th date to the May 15th date to cover those dates. So just to cover the salaries for those individuals and the offset of the loss of revenue, we're going to exceed that by a couple $100,000.
And
Go ahead, Gary.
well, I was just going to say, that being the case, how do we intend to help them make it up?
So the CARES funding, I think maybe Dr. Houlihan was going to update a little bit more. There's some federal funding, which is the CARES funding that we anticipate receiving. It's anywhere from 4.5 to maybe $5 million is what they're estimating our portion to be. We do not have those funds at this time, but there's going to be a process for us to apply for those monies, and then there'll be an approval process for us to get those through DPI. So it's not going to be immediately available. So hopefully there'll be some additional state funding to help offset that, because we're not the only district that can't sustain covering their loss of receipts for child nutrition and after school with the funding that was provided for the emergency leave.
Is the CARES funding what covers the lunches, the meals during the summer as well at those sites?
No,
deal?
The summer feeding program is how we were eligible to run the sites that we are running to provide meals that we're doing right now. So
Right.
they're getting the reimbursements for that.
Okay.
I'll just,
Dr. Houlihan, do you want to give us an update on the federal relief CARES Act?
yeah, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I just want to add a couple of points. Number one, please keep in mind that the State Leave Act, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that act is scheduled to expire and coincides with the governor's first order, which is ending on April 30th. He has a press conference today at 3 o'clock to make additional announcements. So we'll wait and see what happens there. So Gary, to go back to your point, I am advocating, and I think we all need to advocate for the General Assembly to continue to look at additional state funding and relief aid. If the governor announces that we are out of school for the rest of the year or additional restrictions, we are going to need additional state funding to help offset a lot of these costs. Otherwise, we're going to have to absorb them somehow, and I'm very concerned about that. So when you ask how are we going to continue to do that, I would expect there to be some action or discussion at the state level with regard to additional relief aid. So that was my first point I wanted to make. With regard to the summer feeding program, I had an update yesterday with DPI. Right now, they are advocating and encouraging school systems to continue the grab and go meals that we're currently doing even through the summer. They are not prepared to launch into our summer feeding program yet, and are asking school districts to basically try to sustain what we're doing. Mark can comment in a minute, but I do want to point out there are many, many school systems across the state and the nation that are beginning to struggle with continuing to feed because of food shortages, because of fear of child nutrition workers getting sick, or in many cases, they are getting sick. And school districts are forced to shut everything down. If that were to happen, DPI has asked us to contact them immediately, and the Emergency Operations Center in Raleigh would be able to provide us some assistance, as would I would expect locally here. So we're not there at this current time. We are still moving forward with our locations and our sites, but they do want us to try to sustain that for as long as we can. And then finally, on the CARES Act, I'll just comment that what Ms. McLam stated was correct. It's my understanding that number one, we do not have the funding yet. Number two, the range that was written in from the feds is simply a range for planning. Every school system in North Carolina is going to have to apply for that funding, almost like a grant, we are going to have to submit exactly how we're going to use the funds and how much we're requesting. And to be very honest, I do not have a timeline. I do not know when that grant application will open, and I would not anticipate receiving those funds until after the current fiscal year. In other words, after July 1. There's, as you all are probably aware, the House COVID-19 working group is meeting this week. The short session begins next week. While there's no discussion right now about a possible calendar change for next year, we need to be prepared to use those CARES Funding Act in the event that we have the opportunity to start school early. Maybe not for all kids, but for identified children, almost like a summer reading camp that hopefully would maybe begin in August. So the Federal CARES Act, again, I just want to be clear, that will be an application-based process that will be run by DPI. And we can only use those funds for, I believe, 2 or 3 different categories. And the additional remote learning is one of those categories. So Shauna and Mark, anything you all wanted to add that I missed out on?
I would just throw in that we heard this week there are approximately 9 districts throughout the state where their school nutrition program is not as robust as ours is, and they are struggling and are fearful that they are going to run out of money. I think, and so the School Nutrition Association of North Carolina is asking the State Board of Education for additional funding to get us through the end of what would have been the school year and through the summer, particularly if we're going to keep feeding. We do get reimbursements from the federal government at the free and reduced rate, both for the meals and snacks that we're providing, but obviously it does not cover the expense of providing the meals. And then I think the second thing I would throw in is that there are many districts around us that are providing additional compensation to school nutrition employees for their efforts in feeding students during this time. We are not able to do that. We're taking the money that we've got to pay everybody, but there are other districts, they must be getting it from their fund balance or the county commissioners or somewhere, but that is a hot topic almost weekly from our school nutrition employees that other districts are getting stuff, why aren't we?
I saw that at CMS. They gave time and a half for the workers through May 15th. So they must have used their fund balance.
So could I ask a question or could summarize? What we're seeing is the enterprise fund for school nutrition will be between $200,000 to $300,000 short before the end of the fiscal year. And we're not sure of the timing of a federal grant to help us replenish some of those funds. So we're looking to the state for an additional emergency appropriation to cover, among other things, those costs. Is that the takeaway here?
Yes, I would say that's accurate. Because what'll happen is if we don't get any additional relief funds or the CARES funds aren't available, then both of those programs would absorb any overages that we can't fund from that, from their own fund balance or their own which would reduce what they have moving forward.
Okay. I'll just throw this out there. Has anybody considered going to as a last resort, going to the county for some emergency funding for those programs? Because we're talking about getting meals to kids.
The first thing is to go to the state, and if we can't get that, then we can go to the county. I don't know, Shauna and Dr. Houlihan, is that your plan?
Yeah, that would be my plan. Given the fact that a lot of the relief aid coincides with the stay at home and the emergency order from the governor, I kind of want to see what his announcement is going to be today, and see what action comes out of the General Assembly or the state board. State board also meets today as well, and kind of take this one day, 1 week at a time. If we get to the point where we possibly are not going to have additional relief from the state, then of course our next step would have to be going to the county. So I'm just I was just kind of waiting for the process to play out a little bit. But I would propose that by the end of next week or the week after, we'll have a better answer.
Okay. Any more questions on that?
No, thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the list is the 2021 or fiscal 21 proposed budget request. This is a draft of it. I know that everybody on the committee met with Shauna individually to talk about the budget and the needs for this year. So Shauna, I will turn it over to you. So most if not everything is stuff that you've seen already, but we thought we would have a conversation. I know that Mrs. Merrill wants to have a work session of the board next week. So what we would do is take this and send this on to the full board for a work session when we're done with this discussion for any changes. Mrs. McLean?
So I guess this is my first time doing it. Do I present this or do we want to just go through this?
We can just go through it.
Okay, I think, let's see. All right, so.
And Shauna, you and I we can tag team this one together.
I was gonna say, you're gonna jump in, right? Just to start off with, we're gonna kind of go through some of the funding assumptions. We talked about some of those here just a few minutes ago, our budget priorities, the operating budget, as well as the capital budget, and then we'll kind of go through a summary of where we end up. So some of our state budget assumptions, right now, we do know that the health benefits and the retirement benefits will be increasing. The health is going up about 5.5% as the retirement is about 9%. Right now, we're going to plan state funding to be flat. We don't anticipate getting any increases from the state, just knowing the situation we're in and the revenue streams are going to be much less now. I don't anticipate them providing any increases. What they've told us to work from, we're going to see a potential funding deficit because they're going to operate on the continuation budget from 18-19. As of this year, we're still operating on the 18-19 budget because we did not get a 19-20 budget. So we're planning using those same numbers for 2021.
Can I add to that? I would just say, again, the short session is convening next week. I would ask that we all pay attention to that. I do not anticipate budget coming up during that short session. I only believe they're going to focus on the COVID-19 legislation that has to happen and have been advised the same thing as Ms. McLam said, that, right now we're continuing on planning using 18-19 budget numbers. If you've read a lot of national stories on state budgets and impact to K-12, I would not be surprised. And I think we all need to be prepared for a reduction of state funds to some degree. I have no idea what number that means or what percentage, but given the loss of revenue, I cannot imagine a situation where K-12 budgets are not impacted to some degree from a state level. So we just ask everyone to pay attention to that, and we'll certainly keep you updated.
Wow.
Yes, because really flat funding is technically a reduction, because if there's no increases, then you've still got increased in operating and increased costs. So like I say, there's a lot of uncertainty about what the revenue will look like from the state just due to the current COVID-19 situation. We're looking at our local funding. We're assuming that the funding for state mandated benefit cost increase, and they're maintaining our current tax rate at the 44.5, with a projected penny value this year of $2,792,654. So that will generate a little more in our local operating, about $3.8 million. So to use those funds, we're going to look at trying to sustain operations. What can we do to invest in employees? What benefit cost increases are going to be, and then investing in our future with our capital. So with sustaining operations, the things that we really are putting forward as priorities are the facilities operational increases. As we said, things are costing more, and trying to maintain our facilities the best we can. We've talked a lot about utility cost increases. And we are, as you all are aware, we are working on a software modernization, and to be able to offset some additional costs related to that software. The state's picking up the majority of the funding for that, but there will be some local costs that we'll need to continue as we transition to our new software program. We also are looking to build some local teaching positions in just to manage the class size law. We found that we need to have a few additional local teachers built into our budget. When we look at investing in employees, like I said, we're looking at a retirement rate increase of about 9% with a health premium going up about 5.5%. So just offsetting those costs for our local employees is quite a bit of money. We've also included a local teaching supplement increase. So we're trying to look at increasing our local supplements. I provided an attachment along with the budget presentation that had the average supplements statewide and where we rank, just to give you an idea of what other districts are doing on average for their teachers.
And we ranked 17th on this sheet that you sent us. But a few years ago, we were 12th, so I think we're losing some ground. So, and I'm not sure that the number one is right, but anyways.
Shauna.
What?
No, I was just going to ask Shauna. So real quick on the sustaining operations piece. So the increased utilities cost, we're all aware of the increased tax or water rates. Has there been any advancement in conversation with the county on, are we going to get a separate line to help offset that, or we just have to figure it out with our funding?
The information we've gotten from the county, the water sewer is an enterprise fund, as we've talked about, some of our programs are as well. So the county doesn't necessarily operate that. It's operated on its own. So because of that, there's not, I guess, any opportunity to make any agreements on standardizing any of the rates or anything for us. They're trying to sustain operations in that enterprise. So,
but with the increase, I mean, we know it's coming. We can figure out what that increase is going to be. Is there a separate funding request that we can make from the county to help offset that?
I think that when we go to give the budget to the county, that we'll get a little bit more information around this. And I think we know that the increase in water and sewer for next fiscal year for us is about $250,000. So I think we should we would bring that up as one of the things, is we're including this in it. And the rest is just regular utility, electricity and HVAC and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I'll just add that on the local teacher supplement, just wanted to, again, to point out, I believe the last time the county was able to increase that was the fiscal year 2016. That was the year prior to me arriving. So it's been quite some time since we've made any adjustments. And this is one that I think is very, very important for our organization to keep us moving forward. Our teachers, all of our employees are tremendous assets to our organization. But our teaching staff is, I believe, well overdue for some kind of an increase, and just wanted to advocate and support that item.
As we look investing in our future, we look at that as our capital projects and our capital needs. We do have our facilities CIP projects. Transportation has a bus camera request that we have been working on, a 5-year rotation for the bus cameras, as well as some vehicle needs. The technology piece of this year's request is going to include our existing laptop leases that are 6 through 12 and our teacher admin units that we've already done, as well as adding the grades 6 through 5. That was probably something that I think maybe had on for last year. So we're making sure we put that into this year's budget request. And then as well as maintaining those co-curricular supports. A few years ago, you all wanted to have an annual $50,000 built into the capital budget to do a rotation, a 10-year rotation for all the high schools for band uniforms and equipment. So that will also be included in this request.
Shauna, you touched on it a little bit. The original draft showed some stuff for technology, a 2-year refresh and to refresh some school networks for about 2.3 million.
Right.
What happened to that?
So when we get through this at the very end, we've got a lot more needs than the funding that we're going to anticipate getting as part of our penny value with the county. And so we want to present all of the needs, and we've tried to build the budget with as close, without exceeding that. It is going to be more than what that penny generates, but we've got a few slides at the end that address the additional needs that we've tried to, reprioritize. So part of the work session, if there's a budget work session, I think you all as a board can talk about all of the different needs that are not going to be able to be addressed in this budget year.
Right. I think that Shauna tried to put together a budget presentation that came closer to what the proposed appropriation is going to be this year. So if you look at slide 18, we came close, but we're about $2.1 million over what the projected penny value drove. While we're increasing the budget this year because of the tax base by 3.8 million, we lost money on the true up this year, about $1.5 million. So we lost $1.5 million. So we have to look at that. But any of the stuff that we talked about that's still on the other slides, 15 and 20, you can add, we can discuss adding it or whatever, but that's kind of where we got. But I believe that Shauna and Dr. Houlihan talked to Mr. Parker and Mr. Strickland about what we could do. I think the concern with the laptops for 3 through 5 is what school's going to look like in fall of this year. And we know that our 3 through 5 laptops are aging and fragile, I guess is a good word. And I think that that's why the 3 through 5 laptops went in and the other things did not. But I think that those are needs of the technology department, but I'll let Mr. Parker discuss that.
That is correct. And I think the big question is, given what we believe would be the available funding, what are the highest of priorities? They're all priorities, but we have to identify what are the highest. And I do share Ms. Heintel's concern about next year, given kind of the uncertainty of where we are and if we are going to continue or go in and out of a remote learning environment. We really need to shore up our 3 through 5 laptops. And that is why, at least in this initial draft, you're seeing some other tech priorities that are still priorities, but they've just kind of come a little bit down on that priority list. But Mr. Price and board, we'll have all those listed at the end of the presentation.
Yeah. So they're still in there to be discussed, as Dr. Houlihan pointed out, giving supplements to our teachers is a wonderful thing. We haven't done it since fiscal 16, but we also talked about supplement increases to nurses, school psychologists, and social workers, and they haven't had one since 2012. So, we have a lot of moving parts and all under this discussion, but that's kind of how we wanted to start the discussion, trying to get it somewhere near what the appropriation will be from the county.
So on the on the 3 through 5 laptops, I think you guys know where I stand on this. I'm for it, and I understand the need if we have, at least for this coming fall, the concern around that. What I want to see is, do we have any kind of reduction from an operating standpoint going forward? So one, are we decreasing our line item for textbooks because we're now going digital? Are we decreasing our line item for funding to the schools for copying because we're no longer going to have to do as many printouts because we're digital? Do we have a way? So there's concern about remote connectivity right now with with a portion of our students that have prohibited us from getting online as quickly as we wanted to. Do we have a way to push content to these laptops, say a month's worth to store on the device? So there are certain things that I'm going to be looking for from a strategy, and a reduction in overall operating expenses before I know I'm in favor of approving this. It's something that we're signing up for really forever as we go to lease at this level. And I would love to see the operating expense reductions as well to counter that from what we're currently doing today.
I'll just second what Joe is saying. And if we are going to move forward with the 3 to 5 laptops, we also need to make sure that the infrastructure of the network in the schools can handle that increased traffic as well. They aren't going to do much good if the kids can't get online.
Well, they already have it. They already
Not
have
any
it.
upgrades proposed.
What?
Any equipment upgrades proposed in any of the networks or at any of the schools, any of the equipment upgrades as far as the intranet.
And I guess the other question I would have for Mr. Parker, in addition to what you just said, Mr. Sides, is you have enough tech people that if we had to do online learning again in the fall for 3 through 5, so that's what, another 10,000 students using laptops from home. Do you have enough people to help from a help desk?
Good point.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Mr. Sides, our internal within the school networks, we have electronics to handle the volume in each school. We're 10 gig burstable speeds coming out of all of our schools. So if they are in a school building, the network can handle the traffic, network traffic, streaming YouTube videos or live content.
Okay.
External to the building, we expanded our 1 million project. That's a partnership where they provide wireless hotspots to students who do not have connectivity outside the school building. In the fall, they have committed to providing us 3,200 more devices. Currently, we have 6,510 devices in the district. And we're going to get an additional 3,200 more for students who are eligible and do not have either connectivity or enough speed at home to complete their homework while they're outside the school building.
Great job, Jay. And I don't know if Dr. Houlihan, maybe this is directed to you. I think it's going to be important for us to be prepared to really have a good census of what students have what capabilities at home as far as internet goes. And if all Jay's been able to do, we still have students that don't have access, that we can provide access. I think we're going to have to really drill down on what students have what capability so we can be consistent in our instruction.
And Mr. Sides, if I may make another comment, Dr. Houlihan brought up a suggestion of having Wi-Fi on buses. So we explored that as a way forward of providing connectivity, of parking a bus in a neighborhood or in an area where there's a consolidation of students and allowing them to connect to that bus instead of just providing one device per student. You would park a bus and allow many students to connect to one of those wireless hotspots. Really, it's a mobile cellular connectivity on all the buses. We would start out probably with a subset of 15 or 25 and work our way up. I'm speaking to the vendors now, and we've obtained some quotes on that also.
Well, in your opinion, or the information we have thus far, where is the more critical areas? Is it in the urban concentrated areas where that would work, or is it the rural areas where the cable service is non-existent and the cell service is spotty? In your opinion, what you know so far, where's the greatest need?
Well, I mean, our connectivity, it's not tied to a zip code or area. There's students in every area, of our county that don't have connectivity, because last year when we did surveys, across all of our high school students, we found a consistent number of students saying they did not have connectivity or they did not have fast enough connections to complete their homework outside. So naturally, if you're in a closer urban environment, you're going to have more consolidation of students. But as far as from a rural connectivity. Our Forest Hills and Parkwood areas are the ones that I guess have the greatest challenges just due to the distance from towers and distance to connect and speeds out there.
I think that was my point. We're really going to have to drill down with a good survey and know exactly not exactly, it's not going to be exact, but as much as possible, be as accurate as possible, all our students that don't have the access. Because if we go through this stay-at-home thing again and we're trying to do instruction with grading, we're going to have to make sure everybody has access, and we got to know who they are.
Yes, sir. Just one more comment. If any staff or student does not have connectivity, all of our school buildings, if you're around them, you can connect using your same credentials. And within that, we've already offered 15 more antennas where we reuse some of our outdoor antennas on the fronts of schools to allow a greater connectivity and speeds out in front of them. And we posted a process map to show you exactly around the buildings where you could get the best connections, just as a side thought.
That's a great idea, Jay.
So I just kind of wanted to kind of briefly go through a few of the numbers. We have provided you all some redirections that we've discussed. We've looked at some instructional programming that we've been able to identify, some software. We've talked about some transportation items that we might be able to redirect, as well as some central office or central services support, which gave us about almost $1.3 million of redirects. You know, when we line item everything out that we've discussed, some of those priorities, it puts us at a operating budget for next year of $107,889,000. That's almost $5 million more than last year's operating. What that's going to mean, well, let me touch on the capital. So we've adjusted the capital. Our capital request this year would be right at $19,700,000. So when you go through the facilities piece, which is about 16 million, in transportation, having those cameras and some additional vehicles, that's about 300,000. In the technology, just those laptops we've been discussing, the leases on all three leases would be a little over $3 million, and then the co-curricular support. So just to kind of summarize, pulling all that together with the additional penny value, we've talked about the true up being a less this year, which has overall been a reduction to our funding. We're about $2 million over with all of these needs that we've identified in these priorities. We're going to have about a $2 million additional request to the county. So some of the additional items, I think we've hit on some of them. We've provided in those last two slides, and I think it'll be important as a board, as in a work session, to maybe talk through some of those. I know Ms. Heintel mentioned some of the additional compensation items that we've discussed, and some of the other operational needs. And we've also been talking about some of the technology needs that did come off of the request. So that's pretty much everything that we've identified so far. I don't know if Dr. Houlihan, if you want to add anything to any of that.
I'll just add real quick. I think Ms. Heintel wants to comment too. I'll just add that on the last two slides, as we work through this, regardless of whenever we submit the budget, I do want to make sure that we send the full list of needs to the county so that the county and the commissioners can understand exactly what the true needs are. Even though we may not include those true needs in a formal request, I do want to make sure they are very well aware of what we need above and beyond what maybe is currently able to be provided. So I just wanted to make that point, that I think we need to be very clear and transparent with what the true needs are of the organization, even if we submit a request that is less than that. Ms. Heintel?
I agree with you completely. I think it's important to let the county know that when we came up with a budget, there was a bunch of other items that we would have loved to add to the budget if we had the money to do that. On slide 19, I just want to say that investing in our employees, the first two things on the compensation market adjustment, those two items are part of our 3-year comp study that we started 2 years ago. So this would have been year 3. So that will have to push off a year. So there's a lot of stuff to think about on these things, and it should be a good meeting next week of the full board to discuss the budget, unless anybody else has any other questions. Awesome. So be looking for an email from Mrs. Merrill about when we're going to do that next week. Moving along is the
Wait,
next.
are you all gonna vote to move this along as an action item? Does it have to be voted on?
We can do that. So I need a motion to send this to the full board at the work session in the next week.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Next is the budget amendments and transfer, the one page that you got. Unless you have any questions, I need a motion to approve or a motion to recommend it to the full board at the May 5th meeting.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that'll go to the full board on May 5th. Next is the board's produce rollover bid 2021 contract. The nutrition services is requesting approval for a 1-year rollover of the school food bid for Union County Public School Nutrition Department. The original amount of the bid was $430,000, $801.50. We initiated this last year, so this would be a 1-year add to it. So if everybody's okay with that, I need a motion to send that to the full board for approval on May 5th.
Motion to recommend to the full board.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
4-0. The next one is another rollover bid. This one is for a food bid with Portland Food Services. Again, it was initiated last year. This would be one of the 1-year rollover of 4 that we're allowed to take. The original bid was $3,086,378.27. So we need a motion to send that to the full board.
Motion to recommend to the full board.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous to the full board. The next item is the next meeting date. We're gonna have to decide when that is after the board's work session. We're probably gonna need one before the May 5th meeting, just to, I don't know, if anything changes. So that would be it, but I don't know anything for now. So if anyone has any, if there's no other questions on the open session agenda, I would like a motion to go into closed session to consult with our attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which privilege is hereby acknowledged pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3. And like I said before, you're going to exit out of this meeting and get your, Shauna's going to send an email for the next meeting, closed session.
Let's
So
send it.
moved.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you, Justin.
See you on the flip side.